This is an ABC News special.
We will make America great again.
And we're in the battle for the soul of this nation.
With so much on the line, the wait is over. Donald Trump.
China. At no time before have voters faced a clearer choice between two parties.
Joe Biden.
Who we are as a nation, what we stand for, and most importantly, who we want to be. That's all on the ballot.
Face to face. The main event starts right now.
How you doing, man? How are you? I'm well.
Mr. President, sir,
Chris,
you're
that was the
debating
worst
him, not
part of
me.
it.
No.
First of all, I guess I'm debating you, not him, but that's okay. Of Obamacare, I got rid of it.
I'd like you
and we will
Mr.
protect people
President,
with
I'm the
pre-existing
moderator of this
conditions.
debate, and I would like you to let me ask my question, and then you can answer your question. I say this is open discussion.
No,
Let
but
me
this
ask
is
you about.
big. This is big.
Mr.
Sure.
President, can you let him finish, sir?
No, he doesn't know how to do that. He has ideas.
Let him.
There is no manifesto, number
Please
one.
let him speak, Mr.
Number
President.
Bullet,
you have any
Mr. President,
Obamacare
gentlemen, you realize
is no
if you're
good,
both
Joe.
speaking at the
It's no
same
good,
time,
and it's too expensive.
let the President. Go ahead, sir.
Obamacare, do want to
No,
get rid of it.
Chris,
we want to get rid of it.
I understand it, sir, but I have to give you roughly equal time.
Good.
Please let the Vice President talk.
Good. The court.
We have,
I'm not going to give a list.
we have ended this segment. We're going to move on to the second segment.
That was really a productive segment, wasn't it?
7 years, you've done nothing. They understand.
All right. The second subject is COVID-19, which is an awfully serious subject. So let's try to be serious about it.
He waited and waited and waited. He still doesn't have a plan.
Wrong.
I laid out
Sir,
back
it's
in
just 2
March
minutes.
exactly
So
what we
wrong.
should be doing.
Much. It's China's fault. It should have never happened, but it was China's fault. China, Russia, India. Many of your Democrat governors said President Trump did a phenomenal job. President Trump did a phenomenal job. We got the gowns, we got the masks, we made the ventilators. You wouldn't have made ventilators. We've done a great job. It's fake news. They give you good press, they give me bad press, because that's the way it is, unfortunately. But let me just tell you something. I don't care.
Sir, you made a
Far less
was no
lethal disease,
you made
by
a
the way.
point. Let him answer.
And there was no. And
Okay,
by the way,
gentlemen, let me move on to questions about the future. First, President Trump, you have repeatedly either contradicted or been at odds with some of your government's own top scientists. The week before last, the head of the Centers for Disease Control, Dr. Redfield, said it would be summer before the vaccine would become generally available to the public. You said that he was confused and mistaken. Those were your 2 words.
Yeah, it's a very political thing because people like this would rather make it political. It is a very political thing. Become very political because the left, I don't know what I call
the
it.
head of your Operation Warp Speed, Dr. Slawi,
I disagree with him. Yeah, be much sooner. I had him in my office 2 days ago.
He talked about the summer, sir, before it's generally available.
We'll have the answer before November 1st. It could also
I'm
be
talking about
after
when it's
that.
generally available.
We have our military that delivers soldiers, and they can do 200,000 a day. They're going to be
this
delivering
is the
the
same
vaccine.
man
It's
who
all
told
set
you
up.
by Easter this would be gone away. And by
I
the way,
spoke to the scientists that are in charge.
By the way,
they will have the vaccine very soon.
Let him finish.
And a lot more are going to die unless he gets a lot smarter, a lot quicker.
So-
Mr. President?
Did you use the word smart? You graduated either the lowest or almost the lowest in your class. Don't ever use the word smart with me. But there's nothing smart about you, Joe. 47 years, you've done nothing.
Let's have this debate. No,
If you would have had the charge of what I was put through, I had to close the greatest economy in the history of our country. And by the way, now it's being built again.
You see,
and it's
We're going to
going
get
up
to the
fast.
economy in the next segment, sir.
Okay.
It's going up fast.
Because he doesn't have a plan. If I were running, I know what the plan is. And he sits in his golf course and, well, I mean, literally, think about it.
He wants to shut down this country.
Oh.
And I want to keep it open. And we did a great
he
thing
just
by
admitted
shutting
he
it
shut
down.
it down.
Wait a minute,
Let
Joe.
him
Let me
finish,
shut
sir.
you down for a second, Joe, just for 1 second.
I want to move on to another
because
subject.
it's a
I want to move
political
on to another
I gotta
subject.
respond.
But those states are not doing well that are supposed to
President
shut
Trump,
down the
you
whole
have
country.
begun to increasingly question the effectiveness of masks as a disease preventer.
If you look, I mean, I have a mask right here. I put a mask on, when I think I need it.
Yes.
I don't wear masks like him. Every time you see him, he's got a mask.
If everybody wore a mask in social distance between now and January, we'd probably save up to 100,000 lives. It matters.
And they've also
It
said the
matters.
opposite. And they've also
It
said the
matters.
opposite. And they've also
It
said the
matters.
opposite.
Increasingly question the effectiveness of masks.
Opposite.
They've
No
also said, well, look
serious.
All right, I wanna
Dr.
ask you-
Fauci. Dr. Fauci said the
He
opposite.
did not
I want
say
a minute left in this
Masks
segment.
are not good. I'm
wanna
okay
ask-
with masks.
I
I'm
want to
not
ask you
fighting
both
masks.
about one campaign. President Trump, you're holding large rallies with crowds packed together, thousands of people.
Outside.
Outside, yes, sir. Agreed.
Because people want to hear what I have to say. I mean,
But are you
I've
not
done a
worried
great
about it
job
spreading
as a
disease?
president, and I'll have 35,000 people show up at airports. We use airports.
Are you
and
not worried
hangars,
about
and we
the
have a
disease
lot of
issues,
people.
sir?
Well, and we do them outside. We have tremendous crowds, and Joe does the circles and has 3 people someplace.
Okay.
By the way, did you see
Yes,
the,
sir.
one of the last big rallies he had? And one
We've
other,
had no negative
cheek to
effect.
jowl? No negative effect.
We-
But he's been totally irresponsible the way in which he has handled the social distancing and people wearing masks, basically encouraged them not to.
All right.
He's a fool on this.
If you could get the crowds, you would have done the same thing. But you can't. Nobody cares.
Gentlemen, can we move on to the
Nobody cares.
gentlemen?
And he wants to close down he will shut it down again. He will destroy this country. Built the greatest economy in history. We closed it down because of the China plague. When the plague came in, we closed it down, which was very hard psychologically to do. He didn't think we should close it down, and he was wrong. China.
Millionaires and billionaires like him in the middle of the COVID crisis have done very well. Billionaires have made another $300 billion because of his profligate tax proposal, and he only focused on the market. But you folks at home, you folks living in Scranton and Claymont and all the small towns and working class towns in America, how well are you doing? This guy paid
Well,
a total of $750 in
wrong.
taxes.
Sir, wait, no, sir, it's
It's
his
the wrong statement.
Yeah, I understand. You've agreed to the 2 minutes, so please let him have it. Your time is up, sir. We are going to get to
I have to respond to that.
Well, you both had 2 minutes, sir.
I'm the one that brought back football. By the way, I brought back Big Ten football. It was me, and I'm very happy to do it. And
All right,
people of
let's-
Ohio are very proud of me. And you know
We're
how
going
I
to get
found
back.
out?
Will you tell us how much you paid in federal income taxes in 2016 and 2017?
Millions of dollars.
You paid millions of dollars?
Millions of dollars.
So
yes.
not 750?
Millions of dollars, and you'll get to see it. And you'll get to see
When?
it. But let
In
me just
Shala?
tell you, Chris, let me just tell you something, that it was the tax laws. I don't want to pay tax, or I was a private business people. Like every other private person, unless they're stupid, they go through the laws, and that's what it is.
The tax code that made him, put him in a position that he pays less tax than a school teacher makes, on the money a school teacher makes, is because of him he says he's smart because he can take advantage of the tax code. And he does take advantage of the tax code. That's why I'm going to eliminate the Trump tax cuts. And I'm going to eliminate those tax
Okay.
cuts.
You do it over
Because
the
you
last
weren't
25
president
years.
screwing things up.
You were a senator. And
You're
by
the
way,
worst
you were a
president
vice-
America has ever had.
Hey,
Come
Joe,
on.
let me just tell you, even thought of doing,
Okay.
including
Gentlemen.
fixing the broken military that you gave me, including taking care of
we're
your
talking,
vets.
Mr. President, we're talking about the economy. Mr. Vice President, your economic plan, if you were to be
Yes,
elected
ma'am.
president,
My economic plan would create 7 million more jobs than his in 4 years. Now,
but
in
respectfully,
America-
sir, I'm talking about taxes, not spending.
By the way, I'm going to eliminate a significant number of the tax. I'm going to make the corporate tax 28%. It shouldn't be 21%.
If you ever became president with your ideas, you want to terminate my taxes, I'll tell you what, you'll lose half of the companies that have poured in here will leave, and plenty
Half
of
of the
companies that are
companies-
already here, they'll leave for
hardly any
other
companies
places.
have
They will
poured in
leave,
here.
and you will have a
Have it.
depression, the likes of which
Well, sir, is it fair to is it fair to say he blew it when, in
When
fact,
COVID came in.
when there was record low unemployment
Yeah.
before COVID?
Yeah, but because what he did, even before COVID, manufacturing went in the hole. Manufacturing went in the hole.
Excuse
number
me,
one.
Chris. Wait.
Number two.
Chris.
Number three.
They said it would take. No, you're on number two.
No.
Chris. They said it would
This
take
guy
a
is
miracle to bring back manufacturing.
China,
Ain't
Mexico.
China, your son, billions of dollars. Moscow, $3.5 million. $183,000. Oh, really? He didn't
Totally
get
But no,
$3.5 million?
Mr. President,
It's
Mr.
totally-
President, please.
Totally
ask a question.
discredited. Totally discredited.
Mr.
$3.5
President,
million?
Mr.
Oh,
President,
but- Gee.
Mr.
Look,
President, Mr. President,
His position has been totally, thoroughly discredited.
By who?
And
The media.
Even
Mr.
the
President,
people who
please stop.
testified.
With you,
Go
they
ahead.
said-
You get
Here's
the,
the
wait a
deal.
minute. You get the final word, Mr.
Well, it's hard to get any word in with this clown. Excuse me. This.
Hey, let me.
Mr. President,
$3.5
Mr.
million,
President,
Joe.
Mr.
About
President.
my view.
All right,
Not
that's the end
about
of
here.
that's the end of the
Shouldn't
segment.
take
We're,
the money.
we're moving on.
He didn't take them.
Well,
Vice
it's a-
President,
but Chris,
no.
Can I be honest?
No,
He stood up
the answer to
and
the
he
question is no, sir.
With $1 billion, if you
that
get rid of
is
the press.
Gentlemen,
Is-
I hate to raise
Chris,
my voice,
he's
but
on
it seems to
tape.
be, why should I be different than the two of you? So here's the
Got a
deal.
good point.
We have 6 segments. We have ended that segment. We're going to go to the next segment. In that segment, you each are going to have 2 uninterrupted moments. In those 2 uninterrupted minutes, Mr. President, you can say anything you want. I'm going to ask a question about race, but if you want to answer about something else, go ahead. But I think that the country would be better served if we allowed both people to speak with fewer interruptions. I'm appealing to you, sir, to do that.
Well, and him too.
Well, frankly, you've been doing more interrupting
Well, that's
than
all
he
right,
has.
but he does plenty.
Well, less than, sir, less
there's
than.
plenty.
No, less than you have. Let's please continue on. Trump, you have often said that you believe you have done more for Black Americans than any president, with the possible exception of Abraham Lincoln. My question for the two of you is, why should voters trust you rather than your opponent to deal with the race issues facing this country over the next 4 years?
This is a president who has used everything as a dog whistle to try to generate racist hatred.
So,
President Trump, you have 2 minutes. Why should Americans trust you over your opponent to deal with
he
racism?
did a crime bill. You call them super predators, African Americans, the super predators, and they've never forgotten it. They've never, you call them super predators, military leaders and generals, total support. Law enforcement, Portland, the sheriff just came out today and he said, I support President Trump. Law enforcement, radical left law enforcement, radical left Democrats, law and order. Democrats, and in many cases, radical left, law and order. And I'll tell you what, the people of this country want and demand law and order.
All right. I want to return to the question of race.
Law enforcement and the way in which it's enforced. The vast majority of police officers are good, decent, honorable men and women. They risk their lives every day to take care of us. But there are some bad apples. And when they occur, when they find them, they have to be sorted out. What I'm going to do as President of the United States is call together an entire group of people at the White House, well, everything from the civil rights groups to the police officers, to the police chiefs, and we're going to work this out. We're going to work this out so we change the way in which we have more transparency in when these things happen. But we have to have a system where people are held accountable. And by the way, violence in response is never appropriate, never appropriate. Peaceful protest is.
What is peaceful protest? When they run through the middle of the
President
town
Trump,
and burn down your
President Trump,
stores and kill people all
President
over
Trump,
the place,
that
and you
is
say
not
peaceful
peaceful.
protest?
President Trump,
No, it's
I'm not
not,
asking-
but you say it is.
President
not
Trump,
say
I'd
it.
like to continue with the
Yes,
issue
go
of
ahead,
race. I
please.
promise we're going to get to the issue of law and order
Please.
in a moment.
Fine.
Your administration directed federal agencies to end racial sensitivity training. Why did you decide to do that, to end racial sensitivity training?
I ended it because it's racist. It was a radical revolution that was taking place. And he would know.
What is
Oh, it was
radical
totally
about
racist.
racial sensitivity training?
Paying people hundreds of thousands of dollars to teach very bad ideas and frankly very sick ideas, and really they were teaching people to hate our country. And I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to allow that to happen. We have to go back to the core values of this country. You just don't know.
Here's the deal. I know a lot more about
You
this
don't
than he
know.
does.
Let him finish.
The fact is that there is racial insensitivity. People have to be made aware of what other people feel like, what insults them, what is demeaning to them. It's important to people know they don't want to. Many people don't want to hurt other people's feelings, but it makes a big difference. It makes a gigantic difference in the way a child is able to grow up and have a sense of self-esteem. It's a little bit like how this guy and his friends look down on so many people. They look down their nose on people like Irish Catholics like me and grew up in Scranton. They look down on people who don't have money. They look down on people who are of a different faith. They look down on people who are a different color. In fact, we're all Americans. The only way we're going to bring this country together is bring everybody together. There's nothing we cannot do if we do it together.
During the Obama-Biden administration, Ferguson, Oakland, Baltimore, frankly, it was more violent than what I'm even seeing now.
Oh, my
but the
Lord.
reason
This
is
is
that
ridiculous.
the Democrat law and order,
Law and order.
Let him finish.
Law and order. Law and order crime went down 17%, 15% in our administration.
All right.
It's gone up on his watch.
Went down much more in ours.
All right, we're now,
is
you're,
president of
Mr.
the
President,
United
you're going
States
to
of America.
law and order.
Places we had trouble were Democratic-run cities.
That's exactly my question. There has been a dramatic increase in homicides in America this summer particularly, and you often blame that on Democratic mayors and Democratic governors, but in fact there have been equivalent spikes in Republican-led cities like Tulsa and Fort Worth. So the question is this really a party issue?
I think it's a party issue. Look at Chicago. People shot, died, shot. Look at New York. The numbers are going up 100, 150, 200%. Law and order, radical left supporters. If he ever got to run this country and they ran it the way he would want to run it, we would our suburbs would be gone. By the way, our suburbs would be gone.
This is not 1950. All these dog whistles on racism don't work anymore. Suburbs are by and large integrated. What really is a threat to the suburbs and their safety is his failure to deal with COVID. They're dying in the suburbs. His failure to deal with the environment.
I do want to talk about this issue of law and order, though. In the joint recommendation that came from the Biden-Bernie Sanders task force, you talked about, quote, reimagining policing. What does reimagining policing mean, and do you support?
It means...
let me, if I might finish the question. What does reimagining policing mean, and do you support the Black Lives Matter call for community control of policing?
I'm totally opposed to defunding the police offices. The only one defunding in his budget calls for a $400 million cut in local law enforcement assistance. We have to have community policing like we had before, where the officers get to know the people in the communities.
That's not what he's talking about, defunding the police.
That is not true. I'm totally opposed to defunding the police offices.
He has no law enforcement
That's not
support,
true.
almost
That's
nothing.
Look.
Oh, really? Who I
Moderator's
don't think there are any.
And I want to get to another subject, which is the issue of protests in many cities that have turned violent. In Portland, Oregon especially, we had more than 100 straight days of protests, which I think you would agree, you talk about peaceful protests, many of those turned into riots. Mr. Vice President, you say that people who commit crimes should be held accountable. The question I have, though, is, have you ever called the Democratic mayor of Portland or the Democratic governor of Oregon and said, hey, you got to stop this, bring in the National Guard, do whatever it takes, but you stop the days and months of violence in Portland?
I've made it clear in my public statements that the violence should be prosecuted. It should be prosecuted, and anyone who commits it.
But you've never called for the people, the leader. Excuse me, sir. You have never called for the leaders in Portland and in Oregon to bring in the National Guard and knock off 100 days of riots.
They can, in fact, take care of it if he just stay out of the way. Look here.
Oh, really?
Here,
oh, really?
Here's the thing.
I sent in the U.S. Marshals to get the killer of the young days.
President Trump.
Portland wouldn't do anything. I had to send in the U.S. Marshals. They took care of business.
You know, his own former spokesperson said, you know, riots and chaos and violence help his cause.
Law and order. Law and order. Law and order. Law enforcement. Law enforcement. Law enforcement.
That's what this is all about.
I don't know who said that.
He doesn't want to calm things down. Instead of going in and talking to people and saying, let's get everybody together, figure out how to deal with this. What's he do? He just pours gasoline in the fire constantly.
This segment, I'm going to give you a minute to answer, sir. You have repeatedly criticized.
I have to answer his statement.
No, you have repeatedly.
Wait,
you have
just 1
no,
second.
you've been talking back and forth.
You made a statement.
I'm asking you. You have repeatedly criticized the vice president for not specifically calling out Antifa and other left-wing extremist groups. But are you willing tonight to condemn white supremacists and militia groups and to say that they need to stand down and not add to the violence in a number of these cities, as we saw in Kenosha and as we've seen in Portland.
Sure,
Are you
I'm willing
prepared
to do that.
Go ahead, sir.
I would say almost everything I see is from the left wing.
Are you saying?
I'm willing to do anything. I want to see peace.
Then
Give me a
white
name.
supremacists and
Who would
white
you like me to condemn?
White supremacists and right
Proud
militia.
Boys, stand back and stand by. But I'll tell you what. Somebody's got to do something about Antifa and the left.
All these dog whistles on racism don't work anymore.
Because this is not a right-wing problem.
His
This
own
is a left-wing.
FBI director
This
said
is a
the
left-wing
threat
problem.
of white supremacists said.
Well,
We're
then
gonna-
you know what?
No,
He's
no,
wrong.
we're done, sir. We're moving on to the next. We're moving.
When a bat hits you over the
Everybody in your
Antifa is
administration.
bad. Antifa is a dangerous
All right,
radical
gentlemen,
group.
we're now.
They'll overthrow you.
When a
in 2
president,
seconds.
I'm going to ask a question. Looking at both of your records, I'm going to ask each of you, why should voters elect you president over your opponent?
Because there has never been an administration or president who has done more than I've done. The impeachment of Hillary Clinton, con job. There has never been an administration that's done what I've done. The greatest economy in history. By the way, there was unity going to happen. And they were saying, it's time maybe, and then what happened? We got hit, but now we're building it back up again. Space Force,
Sir.
300 judges. It's a record.
Under this president, we become weaker, sicker, poorer, more divided, and more violent. Putin.
Your son got $3.5 million.
And by the way, my son.
Mr. President, your campaign agreed to both sides would get 2-minute answers uninterrupted. Well, your side agreed to it, and why don't you observe what your campaign agreed to as a ground rule, okay, sir?
He never keeps his word. Can you add back, sir?
No,
He's
I'm
a
not
person
asking.
that's
That
not
was a
yelling.
rhetorical question.
My son, he was not a loser.
He was thrown out, dishonorably discharged.
That's not true. He
For
wasn't dishonorably
cocaine use in Ukraine, China, Moscow,
That is
various
not
other places.
true. My
Job.
son.
Tens of millions
All right,
of
But he
dollars.
was
President Trump,
discredited.
we've already been through.
Totally discredited.
We've already been through this. I think the American people would rather hear about more substantial
So do I.
subjects. Well, you know,
$3.5 million
great.
from the
Let's talk
mayor
about
of Moscow.
Let's talk, you know, I'd like to talk about climate change.
So would I.
Okay. The forest fires in the West, when state officials there blamed the fires on climate change, Mr. President, you said, I don't think the science knows. Over your 4 years, you have pulled the U.S. out of the Paris Climate Accord, rolled back a number of Obama environmental records. What do you believe about the science of climate change? What will you do to confront it?
We have now the lowest carbon. If you look at our numbers right now, we are doing phenomenally. The Paris Accord, it was a disaster from our standpoint. People are actually very happy about what's going on. As far as the fires are concerned, you need forest management. The forest floors are loaded up with trees and leaves. You've got to have forest management.
What do you
You've got to have
believe?
cuts.
What do you believe about the science of climate change, sir?
Good. You know, we're planting 1 billion trees, the Billion Tree Project, and it's very
Do you
exciting
believe
for a lot of people.
that human pollution, greenhouse gas emissions contributes to the global warming of
I
this
think
planet?
a lot of things do. Every year, I get the call, California's burning. California's burning. If you had forest management, good forest management, you're at forest cities. They manage their forests. Major country, forest city. He said, sir, we have trees that are far more, they ignite much easier than California. You can't every year have hundreds of thousands of acres of land just burned to the ground.
But, sir,
That's burning down because of a lack of
But,
management.
sir, why have you rolled back the Obama Clean Power Plan, which limited carbon emissions in power plants? Why have you relaxed?
Because it was driving energy prices through the sky.
Why have you relaxed fuel economy standards that are going to create more pollution from cars
Well,
and
not
trucks?
really. It would be much cheaper by
But in the case of
$3,500.
California, they've simply
No, but you
ignored
would take
your
a lot of cars
rollback.
off the market because people would be able to afford a car. Now, the car has gotten so expensive because they have computers all over the place for an extra little bit of gasoline. But what they've done in California is just crazy.
During our administration, the Recovery Act, I was in charge, able to bring down the cost of renewable energy to cheaper than or as cheap as coal and gas and oil. Nobody's going to build another coal-fired plant in America. No one's going to build another oil-fired plant in America. They're going to move to renewable energy, number one. Number two, the first thing I will do, I will rejoin the Paris Accord, because with us out of it, look what's happening.
What about the argument that President Trump basically says that you have to balance environmental interests and economic interests, and he's drawn his line?
Well, this is a guy, all true. And here's the deal.
He's talking about the Green New Deal, and it's not $2 billion or $20 billion, as you said. It's $100 trillion.
I'm talking about
where they want to rip down buildings, where they want to take out the cows, too. You know, that's not true either, right?
All right, let me, because I actually, wait a minute, sir. I actually have studied your plan, and it includes upgrading 4 million buildings, weatherizing 2 million homes over 4 years, building 1.5 million energy-efficient homes. People who support the president would say that sounds like it's going to cost a lot of money and hurt the economy.
What it's going to do is going to create thousands and millions of jobs, good-paying jobs.
But let him finish, sir.
He doesn't know how to do that.
$100 billion.
The fact, and these tax incentives to people, for people to weatherize, which he wants to get rid of. We're in real trouble. Look what's happening just in the Midwest with these storms that come through and wipe out entire sections and counties in Iowa. That didn't happen before. They're because of global warming. We make up 15% of the world's problem.
China, Russia, India, and by the way, $100 trillion. They want to rebuild everything.
If he knew anything about
he made a statement about the military.
Okay.
That is
what
not
he
true.
did is he
You're done in this segment.
He called the military
Mr. Vice President,
stupid bastards.
I
and he
did
said
not
it on
say
tape. He said stupid.
What your environmental changes will do.
The Green New Deal will pay for itself as we move forward.
So do you support the Green New Deal?
Pardon me?
Do you support that?
No, I don't support the Green New Deal.
You don't.
I support the Biden plan.
Final segment. Tonight, millions of Americans are receiving mail-in ballots or going to vote early. How confident should we be that this will be a fair election? And what are you prepared to do over the next 5+ weeks to reassure the American people that the next president will be the legitimate winner of this election? In this final segment, Mr. Vice President, you go first.
His own Homeland Security director, and as well as the FBI director, says there is no evidence at all that mail-in ballots are a source of being manipulated and cheating. We're going to make sure that those people who want to vote in person are able to vote. And this is all about trying to dissuade people from voting, because he's trying to scare people into thinking that it's not going to be legitimate. Show up and vote. You will determine the outcome of this election. If I win, that will be accepted. If I lose, that'll be accepted. You have it in your control to determine what this country is going to look like the next 4 years.
Mr. President, 2 minutes.
So I won that election. Crooked Hillary Clinton. They came after me trying to do a coup. They came after me spying on my campaign. They were a disaster. They were a disgrace to our country. As far as the ballots are concerned, it's a disaster. There's fraud. This is going to be a fraud like you've never seen. It's a fraud. It's been announced.
Okay.
We have major states with that,
sir,
all run by Democrats.
You have been charging for months that mail-in balloting is going to be a disaster. You say it's rigged, that it's going to lead to fraud. In the last midterm election, 31 million people voted mail-in voting. More than a quarter of all the voters that year cast their ballots by mail. Now that millions of mail-in ballots have gone out, what are you going to do about it? And are you counting on the Supreme Court, including a Justice Barrett, to settle any dispute?
Yeah, because what's happening is incredible. I read today where at least 1% of the ballots for 2016 were invalidated.
But what are you going to do about it? If there are millions of ballots going out right now, what are you going to do?
What you do is you go and vote. You do a solicited ballot, and that's okay, or you go and vote.
I'm asking you about the fact that millions of people...
You go and vote. But did you see what's going on? Take a look at West Virginia, mailmen selling the ballots. They're being sold. They're being dumped in rivers. This is a horrible thing for our country. This is not going to end well.
Vice President Biden, the biggest problem, in fact, over the years with mail-in voting, it has been that sizable numbers, sometimes hundreds of thousands of ballots are thrown out. So the question I have is, are you concerned that the Supreme Court with a Justice Barrett will settle any dispute?
I'm concerned that any court would settle this. When you get a ballot and you fill it out, you're supposed to have an affidavit. If you didn't know, you have someone say that this is me. You should be able to, if in fact you can verify that's you before the ballot is thrown out, that's sufficient to be able to count the ballot because someone made a mistake and not dotting the correct I. Who they voted for, testify, say who they voted for, say it's you. That is totally legitimate.
All right.
Excuse me, Chris, when you have 80 million ballots,
Gentlemen, I have a final
Senate
question.
and swamp and
So now,
fraud,
mail service delivers
wait a minute, gentlemen, and the
185
final
million
question
pieces of mail a
is,
day.
in 8
it's a
states,
disgrace.
election workers are prohibited from even beginning to process ballots, even take them out of the envelopes and
Yes.
flatten them until Election Day. That means that it's likely that we are not going to know on Election night who the winner is, that it could be days, it could be weeks.
Could be months.
Until we find out who the new president is. So first for you, sir, finally for the vice president, I hope neither of you will interrupt the other. Will you urge your supporters to stay calm during this extended period, not to engage in any civil unrest? And will you pledge tonight that you will not declare victory until the election has been independently certified? President Trump, you go first.
I'm urging my supporters to go into the polls and watch very carefully, because that's what has to happen. I am urging them to do it. I am urging my people. I hope it's going to be a fair election. If it's a fair
You're urging
election,
them what?
I am 100% on board. But if I see tens of thousands of ballots being manipulated, I can't go along with that. And I'll tell you
what does that
from
mean,
a
not go
common
along?
sense,
Does that mean you're
I'll
gonna
tell you
tell
what
your
it means.
people to take to the
It means you have a fraudulent election. You're
what are
sending
you
out
gonna do?
80
And
million
what would you
ballots.
do about that?
They're not equipped to. These people aren't equipped to handle it. Number one. Number two,
Okay.
they cheat.
President
You think
Biden,
that's good?
Vice President Biden, final question for you. Will you urge your supporters to stay calm while the vote is counted, and will you pledge not to declare victory until the election is independently certified?
Yes, some of these ballots in some states can't even be opened until Election Day. Now, by the way, our military, they've been voting by ballots since the end of the Civil War, in effect. It's the same process. It's honest. No one has established at all that there is fraud related to mail-in ballots.
It's already been established. Take a look at Carolyn Maloney's race.
You had an opportunity to respond.
Look at Carolyn Maloney.
Go ahead.
They have no idea what
Vice
happened.
President Biden, go ahead.
The fact is, I will accept it, and he will too. You know why? Because once the winner is declared, after all the ballots are counted, all the votes are counted, that'll be the end of it. That'll be the end of it. And if it's me, in fact, fine. If it's not me, I'll support the outcome. And I'll be a president not just for the Democrats. I'll be a president for Democrats and Republicans.
I want to
In
see an
fact-
honest ballot count.
Gentlemen, you say that's the end of it? This is the end of this
An
debate?
honest ballot count.
We're
And I
going to
think
leave
he
it
does
there.
too.
To be continued.
I got very lucky. I'm going to get very lucky tonight as well.
Well, it is hard to know where to start. I'm not sure how people are going to feel about that to be continued at the end. And people have to make their own judgments about how the candidates handled themselves tonight, who made the better case, who offered plans for the future, who told the truth, and who deserves to be president. Those are all judgments that are going to be made over the next several days and weeks. But I have to speak personally here as somebody who's watched presidential debates for 40 years, as somebody who's moderated presidential debates, as someone who's prepared candidates for presidential debates, as someone who's covered presidential debates. That was the worst presidential debate I have ever seen.